Don't you dare show up there. You'll embarrass me in front of people who matter. 3 weeks after that phone call, my brother stood at a podium in Lunenburg with his palm resting on a staircase railing I'd shaped alone over 8 months of nights, thanking an anonymous craftsman he swore he'd never met. I was 6 feet away on the other side of the glass, maple dust ground into my jacket seams, close enough to see the spot under the wood where I'd carved a small gull, right beneath his hand. He couldn't see me out there. Or maybe he could and just didn't recognize the shape of his own brother in work boots with a dented thermos, the way you stop recognizing something you've decided doesn't belong to your life anymore. Through the glass I watched chandeliers, champagne trays, women in dresses that cost more than my truck, and Cale, my little brother, in a blazer that fit like it was sewn onto his shoulders, telling a roomful of investors that none of this would exist without the vision of a master artisan who wished to remain anonymous. Somebody near the door glanced out at me, at the jacket, at the thermos, at the boots with the sole starting to peel, and stepped sideways, the way you do when you don't want something on the sidewalk to touch you. My name is Aldous Ashcroft. I'm 41 years old. I built things out of wood for a living, in a little shop 2 streets back from the harbor in a town on the south shore of Nova Scotia, the kind of town where the fish plant whistle still tells half the street when to break for lunch. My hands are rough enough now that I don't feel splinters half the time until I see the blood. My left index finger stops at the first knuckle. A planer took the rest of it when I was 23 and still learning to respect the machines more than I did. I drink my coffee black, and I drink it from Tim Hortons, and I drink it cold about as often as I drink it hot, because something always needs doing before I remember the cups even in my hand. Cale is 4 years younger than me. Cale Covington now. He took our mother's maiden name legally, some years back, said Ashcroft didn't fit the kind of firm he wanted to build. I remember reading that in an email and just sitting there with it for a while, the way you sit with a splinter you know is going to take some digging to get out. We grew up in a narrow greenhouse up from the wharf, our father a fisherman, out on the boat 6 days a week when the fishery still gave a man that kind of work. When he died, his heart just stopped one November on the deck of the Marlene J. Halfway through hauling a line, I was 19. Cale was 15. I quit school that winter. Somebody had to keep the lights on and keep Cale in his books, because our mother was already sick by then too, and there wasn't a version of that year where I got to choose otherwise. I picked up carpentry the way you pick up anything when you need the money by Friday, badly at first, then less badly, then well enough that men twice my age started asking me to look at their cabinets. Cale got out. Dalhousie, then a firm in Halifax, then his own name on a building for the first time when he was 31. I was proud of him the way you're proud of something you built with your own hands and then had to let walk away from you. I never once asked him to thank me for it. I didn't think I needed to. But somewhere along the way, my little brother started talking about our childhood like it was a stain he'd managed to get out of a good shirt. At a dinner 2 years back, with some investors from Toronto at the table, I heard him describe his upbringing as modest, but I was fortunate to find my own path early. Modest. Like our father hadn't died with his boots still wet. Like I hadn't slept 4 hours a night for 2 winters so he could afford textbooks. The call that started all this came on a Tuesday evening in April, while I had a router running and couldn't hear my phone the first 2 times it rang. "Big brother," Cale said, when I finally picked up, and there was a brightness in his voice I didn't trust right away, the kind of brightness people put on when they want something. "How's the sawdust business?" "Keeping the lights on," I said. "What is it, Cale?" He told me about the hotel. A boutique property, waterfront, in Lunenburg, the old sail loft building, the one with the good bones and the bad roof that everybody in 3 counties had been arguing over for years. He'd bought it with 2 silent partners, vetted it, and was going to turn it into the kind of place where people from Boston paid $400 a night to feel like they'd discovered something authentic. "It's going to be the biggest thing I've done," he said. "Covington Restoration Group. That's the name on the sign, Aldous. Can you believe that?" I told him it sounded like a lot. He laughed, the kind of laugh that isn't really about anything funny. "Listen," he said, "when we open, I mean, obviously it's not really it's black tie, investors, press. You understand. A pause, the kind he used to leave right before delivering the part he'd rehearsed. Don't you dare show up there in your work clothes. You'll embarrass me in front of people who matter. I sat with the phone against my ear for a second, in a shop that still smelled like fresh-cut spruce, looking down at hands that had never once, in 41 years, been anything but useful. Sure, I said. Understood. I didn't tell him what happened after I hung up, that a broker's assistant called me not 2 hours later, from a firm out of Toronto I'd never heard of, saying they represented a boutique hospitality project in Nova Scotia that badly needed a master joiner, someone who could turn around custom staircases, railings, and reception millwork inside 8 months, at a rate so far under market it was practically an insult. The kind of rate you only offer when you're desperate and hoping nobody with real skill notices the number before they notice the deadline. I asked for the address of the property before I said yes. Lunenburg. The old sail loft. My brother's building. I sat in that quiet shop a long time that night, coffee gone cold in the thermos, before I called the broker back and told her I'd take the job, on one condition. My name doesn't go on anything. No contract with my legal name on it that anyone might read aloud at a podium someday. I'd sign it under a company name instead, one I made up on the spot, borrowed off nothing but a chart my father used to keep tacked over his workbench, half water depths and half nonsense. She asked why. I told her some men don't like their work getting mixed up with their name. That wasn't the truth. Not the whole of it, anyway. The truth was that if Cale Covington ever found out the anonymous artisan saving his sinking hotel was his own brother in a sawdust jacket, he would rather watch the whole building collapse around him than let me hand him a single board. I didn't know yet how close that building really was to collapsing. I didn't know about the money he'd already lost, or what he stood to lose beyond the money. All I knew, that first night I let myself into the empty shell of that old sail loft with a headlamp and a tape measure, was the smell of the harbor coming through a broken window, and the shape of a staircase that didn't exist yet, and a small carving tool in my coat pocket that had belonged to my father. I ran my thumb along the first length of maple I'd chosen for the railing. Good wood. Straight grain, no knots to fight. My father used to say good wood tells you what it wants to become if you're patient enough to listen. Before I made a single cut, I took out that little tool, turned the board over so the mark would face down and inward, out of sight of anyone who'd ever stand at that rail and admire it from above. And there, in a room nobody had walked into yet, under a light my brother was paying for and would never know I'd earned, I carved a small bull into the underside of the wood, wings out, the way our father taught us both to do it when we were boys young enough to still believe he'd always be the one holding the knife steady. The 8 months that followed are mostly a blur of sawdust and streetlight. I'd drive the 2 hours from my shop to Lunenburg 4 nights a week, after I'd finished whatever paying work kept my own lights on back home, and I'd let myself in through the service entrance with a key the broker's people had cut for a man whose name they didn't actually know. I worked under a single trouble light most nights, because the building's electrical wasn't fully up yet, and by January my hands had gone past sore into something closer to numb, that stinging kind of numb where you stop trusting your fingers to tell you the truth about the blade. I missed my niece's birthday party in October because I was fitting risers on the east staircase until 2 in the morning. I told my sister-in-law, Marla, that work had piled up. She didn't push. Marla's a decent woman. She married into this family long after Cale had already started climbing away from it, and she still calls me every Christmas even when he forgets to. I hated lying to her most of all, out of everyone. Meanwhile Cale's world was moving in the opposite direction, and I got most of it second-hand, the way you get the weather from someone standing in a different town. The broker's assistant, a soft-spoken woman named Priya who handled the money end of things, would call with updates dressed up as instructions. Mr. Covington wants the reception desk finished by the 15th, he's bringing the Toronto investors through for a walkthrough. Mr. Covington would like the railings to feel more, quote, elevated. Once she read me an email straight off her screen, forwarded from Cale, where he described the entire East Wing renovation to a journalist from a Halifax business magazine as years of my own hands-on involvement in traditional joinery techniques. My own hands-on involvement. I remember standing there with the phone against my shoulder and a chisel in my hand, laughing once, short and ugly, the kind of laugh that isn't really a laugh. "You still there?" Priya asked. "Still here," I said. "Tell him the desk will be done." It was March when Kale actually came to see the work in person for the first time, not knowing, of course, whose work it was. I'd gotten word 2 days ahead through Priya and I'd made sure to be gone before he arrived, but I'd left a stretch of framing unfinished on the second floor, and a delay meant I had to duck into the old linen closet off the east hallway to avoid him seeing me on his way through. I stood in that dark closet with my heart going harder than it needed to, listening to my own brother's voice on the other side of a thin door. He had 2 men with him, investors by the sound of it, both from away. I heard him stop near where my jacket was hanging on a hook by the stairwell, my actual jacket, the canvas one gone soft and gray with wear, sawdust worked so deep into the weave it had become part of the color. "Someone left this," Kale said, and there was a little laugh in his voice, the kind meant to invite the other men to laugh with him. "God, I don't know where these contractors shop. Looks like something you'd find on a fishing boat." One of the investors said something I couldn't make out. No, Kale said, "the craftsman himself is very particular, very serious about his work. Don't misunderstand me, I just mean the presentation could use some work. I keep telling the agency, send him a proper uniform, something that photographs well." A pause. "Anyway. This is the east stair. Watch your step, the finish is still curing." I stood in that closet with my back against a shelf of folded linens, my own jacket hanging 4 feet away from me on the other side of a door, being turned into a joke for men who'd never once in their lives spent a winter gutting fish or hauling a chisel until their hand cramped shut. I didn't cry. I want to say that plainly, because I've thought about that moment more times than I can count since, and I never once cried in that closet. What I did was breathe very carefully, the way you do when you're trying not to make a sound, and I thought about the fact that the jacket he was mocking had kept me warm the winter our father died, when I was walking the wharf at 5 in the morning looking for whatever work a 19-year-old with no diploma could find. When they'd moved on down the hall, I came out, put my jacket on, and finished the framing. It was 2 weeks after that, going through a stack of paperwork Priya had left for me to review and sign, invoices, material orders, nothing that should have concerned me beyond the job, that I found something that wasn't meant for my eyes at all. A financing document, tucked in with the rest by mistake, detailing the original contractor Kale had hired before the whole project nearly collapsed. A firm calling itself Meridian Bespoke Interiors, out of Vancouver, that had taken a deposit of just under $400,000 from Kale and his investors and then simply stopped answering calls. There was a line near the bottom, in the dry language lawyers use when they're trying not to alarm anyone, about potential securities and fraud implications should the project fail to reach completion as represented to investors. I read that sentence 3 times. I understood, then, in a way I hadn't fully let myself understand before, what I was actually holding up. It wasn't just my brother's pride. It wasn't just a hotel. If this building didn't open, if the investors didn't get what they'd been promised, there was a real chance my brother would be looking at more than embarrassment. There was a real chance he'd be looking at a courtroom. I sat with that piece of paper in my hands for a long time in the empty lobby, night coming down outside the tall front windows, the harbor going that flat gray-black it goes in early spring. Some part of me, and I won't pretend otherwise, thought, let him drown a little. Let him feel what it is to have the ground go out from under him, the way it went out from under me the winter I was 19 with nobody to catch me either. He wanted to be somebody without me. Let him find out what that costs on his own. I thought about calling Priya the next morning and telling her I was finished, effective immediately, whatever penalty that carried. I thought about it seriously enough that I actually dialed the first 3 digits of her number before I put the phone down. What stopped me wasn't some grand realization about brotherhood. It was smaller and stupider than that. It was picturing my mother, gone 11 years now, standing in the kitchen of the house on Water Street the night Kale got his acceptance letter, holding it against her chest like it might disappear if she let go, saying to me, "You'll look out for him when I can't anymore, won't you, Aldous?" I'd said yes without thinking, the way you say yes to anything a dying woman asks of you. I hadn't thought, at the time, that it might mean carrying an entire building on my back while he stood in a blazer telling strangers he'd built it himself. I finished the stairs. I finished the reception desk. I took on the custom paneling for the lounge that Priya said Kale wanted redone twice because he couldn't articulate what was wrong with it the first time, and I redid it twice, and I said nothing, and I signed nothing with my real name, not once. The last real conversation I had with my brother before the night of the opening happened by accident, 10 days before the ribbon was due to be cut. He called me directly, not about the hotel, for once, but about our mother's old cottage lot up the shore, which we still owned jointly and which a developer had been sniffing around. Business, purely business, the kind of call where neither of us had to pretend to feel anything. Near the end of it, almost as an afterthought, he said, "You're not planning on coming to the opening, are you?" "Wasn't invited," I said. "Aldous, don't be like that. You know how it is. It's not personal, it's optics. Half these investors are the kind of people who judge you by whether your shoes match your belt." A short laugh. "You'd hate it anyway. Standing around with a glass of champagne you don't even like, listening to people talk about capital and finishes for 3 hours. "Probably would," I said. "Come on. Don't sound like that." "Like what?" "Like I've done something to you." A pause, and for one single second, I heard something under his voice that might have been real, that might have been the 15-year-old boy I used to walk to the school bus stop in the dark so our mother could sleep an extra hour. "I just want this one thing to go right, Aldous. I need this one thing." I almost told him then. The words were right there, sitting behind my teeth. "It's me, Kale, it's been me the whole time, the stairs, the desk, the paneling, all of it, and I did it for $400 a week because the man you hired to replace me stole your money and left you standing at the edge of a cliff you don't even know you're on." I almost said it. But I thought about the linen closet. I thought about the laugh he'd used to describe my jacket to strangers, the little performance of it, the ease. And I understood, the way you understand something you've known for years but never said aloud, that if I told him now, before the building was finished, before the money was safe, he wouldn't feel grateful. He'd feel exposed. And a cornered animal doesn't thank the hand that built its cage a way out, it bites first and figures out the rest later. He would find some way to make it my fault that I hadn't told him sooner, some way to turn the debt into another grievance against me, and the whole thing, the stairs, the desk, 8 months of my hands aching in the dark, would collapse into just one more thing I'd done wrong by not doing it his way. "You'll be fine," I told him instead. "Congratulations, Kale. I mean it." "Thanks," he said, already somewhere else in his head, already moving on to the next call. "I'll send pictures." He hung up first. He usually did. 10 days later I stood outside that same building in my work jacket with a cold thermos in my hand, listening to him call some anonymous man a true master of the craft, while the only proof of who that man actually was sat carved into the underside of a railing 8 feet away, facing down, out of sight, exactly where I'd put it. I could have turned around right there. Part of me wanted to. My truck was 2 blocks up the hill, and there was a version of that night where I just walked back to it, drove the 2 hours home, and let the whole thing stay buried under a stair rail forever. Nobody would have known the difference except me. What stopped me was a young man in a server's vest coming out through the side door with a bin of empty champagne bottles, glancing over, doing a double take. Danny Winnett. I'd known him since he was a boy. His father used to crew with mine on the Marlene J before the fishery went the way it went, and Danny had worked odd jobs around my shop 2 summers back when he needed the money for community college. "Mr. Ashcroft," he said, like he wasn't sure his own eyes. Then he saw my hand, the missing knuckle wrapped around the thermos, and any doubt went out of his face. "Wait, is it you? Are you the guy who's been?" He didn't finish it. He didn't need to. "Go on inside, Danny," I told him. "Get back to work." But he didn't move, and something in the way he looked at me, like a fact rearranging itself behind his eyes, told me the quiet part of this was already over, whether I wanted it to be or not. I went in through the side door with him. Nobody stopped a man in a server's shadow. The lobby was warmer than the cold outside, full of perfume and candle smoke and low music, and for a second I just stood at the edge of it, invisible in a room I'd built with my own hands, watching my brother work a half circle of investors near the east staircase, my staircase, gesturing up at the railing like a man showing off a painting he'd bought at auction. I walked toward him. I didn't hurry. I didn't need to. Cale. He turned, and I watched three things cross his face in about a second and a half: recognition, horror, and then something that tried very hard to be composure and mostly failed. Aldous. What are you? This isn't. I'm not here to make a scene, I said, quiet enough that it didn't carry past the small circle of people already turning to look. I need 2 minutes. This is not the time, he said through his teeth, and I could see his hand come up like he wanted to physically steer me back toward the door, the way you'd steer a stray dog off a porch. I didn't raise my voice. I reached past him instead, put my hand flat on the railing he'd just been showing off, and turned it, gently, so the underside caught the light from the chandelier above us. There, where nobody standing and admiring the finish would ever have thought to look, was the small carved gull, wings out, exactly the shape our father used to guide our hands through when we were small enough to sit on his knee at the workbench. You know what this is, I said to Cale. Not loud. Just steady. A woman near him, gray-haired, sharp-eyed, the kind of investor who'd clearly seen enough performances in boardrooms to recognize a real one, leaned in and looked at it too. Is that a maker's mark? She asked. It's a family mark, I said. Our father taught it to us. He put it in every toy he ever whittled for us as boys. I've been putting it in every piece of this hotel for 8 months. I looked at Cale. I'm the anonymous artisan you've been thanking all night. The room didn't gasp, not the way it might in a film. It went quieter, the particular quiet of people recalculating a story in real time. Cale's face had gone the color of the plaster behind him. That's, he started, and stopped. Started again. That's not, Aldous, this is a joke, this is some kind of. It's not a joke, I said. Ask Priya. Ask the invoices. Ask why the price was so low nobody with real skill should have taken it. I kept my voice level the whole time, the way you'd talk down a spooked animal, because that's exactly what he was, cornered, in front of the very people whose good opinion he'd built his whole second life around. I'm not telling you this to embarrass you tonight. I'm telling you because a man just recognized me at the door and I'm done pretending to be somebody I'm not for a company that has my brother's name on the sign but not mine. He didn't answer right away. The gray-haired investor was still looking at the gull, tracing it lightly with one finger, and I could see in her face that whatever she made of this scene, it had done something to how she saw the whole building, like she was noticing, for the first time, that the thing she'd been calling exquisite actually had a person's whole life pressed into it. I lowered my voice further, so it was really only for him now. Cale. I'm not here to take anything from you. I don't want the podium. I don't want the article rewritten. I want you to understand why I didn't tell you sooner, and then I'll go, and you can finish your night. He swallowed. Something in his jaw was working, the way it used to when he was 9 years old and about to cry and determined not to in front of the older boys at the wharf. Meridian took your deposit and vanished, I said. For $100,000, near enough, gone, along with whatever those investors had already put in on the strength of your name. You were 3 months from a lawsuit that wouldn't have stayed civil for long. I read the letter, Cale. I know what securities implications means when a lawyer writes it that carefully. I didn't take this job to save your reputation. I took it because I did not want to watch you go to prison over a hotel. I nodded toward the railing. I put my name under a broker instead of on a contract because I know you. I knew that if you found out your big brother, the one you told these people not to bother inviting, was the only thing standing between you and ruin, you'd rather let it all come down around you than say thank you for it. Nobody in that little circle said anything. Even the music behind us seemed to have thinned out. I wasn't hiding out of shame, I said, quieter still. I was hiding because your pride would have cost you everything, and I decided a long time ago I wasn't going to let that happen to Mom's son, whatever he calls himself now. That last part landed somewhere I hadn't quite meant to aim, and I watched it hit him. His eyes went bright and wet in the chandelier light, and for one long second he looked less like Cale Covington, restoration entrepreneur, and more like the boy who used to sit at the end of our father's workbench, small hands cupped around a scrap of maple, waiting to be shown how to hold the knife. "Ash," he said. Not Aldous. Ash, what our father called me, what nobody in 20 years had called me to my face. His voice cracked on it, just slightly, just enough. "I didn't know. I swear to God I didn't know it was you." "I know," I said. He looked down at my hand on the railing, at the place where my finger stopped short, and something in his face folded in on itself, quiet and unglamorous, nothing like the speeches he gave to rooms full of strangers. He didn't say sorry. He didn't need to, not right then, not in front of a dozen people still working out what they'd just watched. What he did was reach out and put his own hand next to mine on the wood, over the little carved gull, the way you'd touch something you were afraid might disappear if you let go too soon. The gray-haired investor cleared her throat gently. "I think," she said, "to no one in particular, this hotel just got a much better story than the one in the press release." Somebody laughed, soft and surprised, and the tension in the little half-circle loosened enough that people started to drift, the way crowds do when they sense a private thing has run its course. I stepped back. Cale didn't stop me this time. "Stay," he said, low, "just for me. Please. Just have a drink. Let me introduce you properly. Just once." I thought about the jacket hanging on a hook, about a linen closet, about 8 months of nights with the trouble light buzzing over my head. I didn't feel like celebrating. But I didn't feel like leading angry either, not anymore. "One drink," I said. "Then I'm driving home. I've got a job waiting on me tomorrow that actually pays on time." He laughed at that, a real laugh, rough at the edges, and for the first time in longer than I could easily count, it didn't feel like a performance for anyone else in the room. 3 weeks later, a package arrived at my shop in a plain box, no card attached at first glance. Inside was a new canvas work jacket, good heavy cotton, no logo, no price tag left in it. Tucked into the pocket was a folded scrap of paper in Cale's handwriting, not polished the way his emails always were, just a few crooked lines, saw the old one was about done for. "Figured you'd earned a new one. Come up for Sunday dinner sometime, Marla's asking." "See." I put the new jacket on over my old flannel shirt, right there in the shop, and it fit fine, the way any decent jacket fits a man who's worn one his whole life. Then I went looking through the offcuts bin by the workbench until I found a good clean piece of maple, no knots in it, the kind my father always said told you what it wanted to become if you gave it the time. I didn't hide this one under anything. I carved the gull slow, careful, wings out the way he taught us, and when it was done I set it upright on the windowsill over the bench, where the afternoon light comes in low off the harbor and catches the grain just right around 4 o'clock, same as it always has. Sunday dinners started up again that spring, at Marla's insistence more than Cale's, though he doesn't fight her on it. The first few were stiff, him asking careful questions about lumber prices like we were strangers being polite, me answering in the short sentences I use when I haven't figured out how to trust a room yet. It got easier by the 3rd or 4th one. Somewhere around the 5th, he asked me to look at a wobbling table leg in his own dining room, the one under the window, and I fixed it in about 4 minutes with a chisel I keep in my truck for exactly that kind of small, unglamorous job. He watched the whole time instead of going back to his phone. I don't think he'd ever actually watched me work before, not once in either of our lives. The hotel's still standing, doing fine by all accounts, full most weekends through the summer. Cale tells people the truth about the railings now, when they ask, not with a speech, just a plain sentence or two, my name in it where it should have been from the start. I've heard him say it exactly the way you'd mention any other true thing about your family, no more, no less, and that's really all I ever wanted out of it. Not the credit on a plaque. Just not being erased. The gull on my windowsill has company now. There's a second one next to it, smaller, a little uneven around the wingtip, Kale's, not mine. He asked me to teach him the cut one Sunday afternoon in my shop, sawdust getting into a blazer he didn't seem to mind ruining for once, and his hands shook doing it, the way mine used to shake the first winter our father put a knife in them. He kept it. Didn't give it to me, didn't sell it, didn't photograph it for anybody's website. Just set it on his desk in Halifax, right beside the Covington Restoration Group nameplate, our father's mark, carved by Ashcroft hands, sitting next to the name he'd traded ours away for. I go by the shop most evenings around 4, same as always, and I still catch the 2 gulls in that low light before I lock up. I never planned for there to be 2. I just like, some days, standing there a minute longer than I need to, looking at the pair of them facing the same direction.